Hello and welcome to Cloud Tech Talks. This is Pritesh. I'm back with another video. Today I have a very special guest with me. His name is Jona Apelbaum, and he's a solutions engineer at HashiCorp, and he specializes in a product called Console. He's going to answer a few questions which we have about some of the concepts related to the product suite that HashiCorp carry to the market. And today's video is about service discovery and service networking as well. In terms of your point about networking, how is it different from traditional networking? People who have been doing networking for quite some time, because since we have now entered mainstream cloud, even more so after COVID, a lot of companies have already adopted cloud, or at least a combination of public and private cloud. How is it different from traditional networking?
So IP-based networking, right, as I would say is traditional, doesn't work anymore, or doesn't work at least for a lot of use cases. To start with IP, if you go back in history, IP has never been designed for what we're using today, originally, right? Let's start with that statement. And the issue with IP-based or traditional networking is I need to know at any moment what the actual physical IP addresses of my instances. So if I have a service that has 10 instances, I need to know every single IP address of that instance. So what's going to happen very often, instead of me opening a per IP address, because that's just too much work to do these fine-grained policies, I'm going to open up the complete subnet or complete VLAN, right? So that traditional networking is just too complex. And the other piece of traditional network, if you go into the service networking, is the old castle and moat model. Right. In the traditional networking, I would have a firewall and load balancer, a firewall on the edge, and then but once I get in, the castle, if very often people don't, or company don't secure that as much as that in that node south traffic, and so that in the new networking service networking model, or in the console service networking model, what we try to achieve is with Console Connect in this case, is imagine a little load balancer, a little firewall alongside every single instance of an application.
Right.
That's the Envoy, that's these proxies that we deploy. And Console will automatically make sure to configure and bootstrap these little envoys and little load balancers and firewalls.
Right. That's a great way to put it. So that covers off service discovery, networking, and even to a great extent the difference between how modern day service discovery and service networking works versus traditional networking practices. One of the concepts that I keep hearing a lot of, especially the operating model message that HashiCorp carries to the market, right, is zero trust networking. Can you touch on that? Can you elaborate what is this about, and what does one need to keep into consideration when someone is talking about zero trust networking? Why is it important?
Zero trust networking. Why is it important? Because you can't trust, let's start with that. So you can't trust anyone, not developers, not anybody, not because you don't trust the person, right? By no means, but because they don't necessarily know the security posture or how to apply that security posture you try to implement, right? So zero trust stuff on the principle, look, I want to shield that away from everybody by just assuming I don't trust them, right? The other piece, and I always tell customers, I cannot design a system that nobody will get in, right? I can make sure it's very difficult, right? But I'm always designing, or the way we should design systems is assume they will get in at some point, but limit the surface of attack, right? Once they're in, how far can they go, right? And so zero trust tries to implement, to achieve that, different kind of principles. One, every single service, or a service instance, better said, in your network or in your environment should be identified. It should be identity driven. How do we provide this identity? With certificates, right? So how do I can go very specific, but let's stay high level with certificates. There is a specific type of certificates for that. Then the second piece is, once I identify a service, and he wants to connect to another service, we need to mutually authenticate them, right? So basically one service needs to say, hey, I'm service X. The other say, hey, I'm service Y. Yeah, cool. Let's make a connection, right?
Right.
Once that connection, so once we have that, that's the third principle of zero trust is, okay, I'm a developer, I want to connect to Pritesh, right? As an example, but I'm actually allowed to talk to you. I can, in my code, try to connect to you, and the connection is going to be made, but is that connection authorized? So I need to authorize that connection. And the fourth one is these identities, these certificates should be short-lived, so they should be time-bound, right?
Yeah.
So that means that we don't want a long-lived certificate. And then the last and it needs to be encrypted, so all data needs to be encrypted. And one that very often is forgotten is once I got all of that set up, I need to have everything audited and logged, right? So when something happened, I can trace back what happens. And that in this zero trust principle, you want to apply that to as well the communication between services as the access to the control plane.
Right. Okay. So that brings me to a point where you touched on some of the use cases earlier about console, and now you've described in line with that how zero trust networking is established. Keeping that into account, can you touch on some of the overall benefits of console, keeping in mind that let's assume an organization does not adopt to a modern day study solution like console. How difficult is it for an organization to accomplish this without a tool like console?
So if you take a look at service mesh, so very often when you talk to customers that do know console and you ask what is console, you'll very often hear console is a service mesh, right? Console is not a service mesh. Service mesh is part of console, right? So console has different use cases. And you can't do service mesh, so that service networking, that secure connection, without having services covered to help you to set up these connections, right? Then how do you set up physically this connection? You can't have that without network infrastructure, without things like Terraform sync. So what I'm telling customers that do not know anything about console is very often you see customers doing these complex multi-cloud architectures, and then you ask the question, how do you make that one line happen? How do you make these lines actually happen? They say, oh yeah, that's networking firewalls. Okay, that's fine, but tomorrow that application may be somewhere else, right? A developer may be how do you trust the identity of that application? So yes, being able to put zero trust networking or zero trust principle across clouds, across identity, is something that console will help you achieve, and fairly easy.
This is Jonah and myself signing off from Cloud Tech Talks. I will put the links to all of the solutions that we discussed today in the description. Please feel free to provide your feedback. Let us know if you like this content and would like to go deeper into any of the concepts that we discussed. We'll be happy to do so. And until next time, this is Pritesh signing off from Cloud Tech Talks. Thank you so much.